left, right and centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Tonight, Sonia Gandhi rubbishes the statement made by senior Congress leader Janardhan Dwivedi that caste-based reservations should end and only economic criteria used. Is there a complete lack of political will to end caste-based reservations in this country? Is it even possible in a system where caste continues to be so deeply entrenched? That's going to be a big focus tonight. And in fact, in news that's just come in the last few minutes, Congress President Sonia Gandhi has completely disowned a statement from one of her closest advisors, Janardhan Dwivedi, who had in an interview called for an end to caste-based reservations, urging the use of economic criteria instead. In a statement that's just been released a short while ago, Sonia Gandhi has said the Congress is of the firm opinion that caste-based reservations must continue. Well, joining me now for more on that is my colleague Sunil Prabhu. Sunil, we were first surprised that Mr. Janardhan Dwivedi made the statement in the first place because he is such a close advisor of Mrs. Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi. But now Sonia Gandhi's strong statement this evening has also come as a surprise. What's going on?
Well, I think Mrs. Gandhi realized that Mr. Janardhan Dwivedi has really gone beyond that Lakshman Rekha. Of course, the fact is that after 36 years, he's given his interview, and after speaking what he did, it has created a lot of embarrassment for the Congress party. The Congress party has been the first, as she has really enunciated clearly, from 1950s for caste-based reservation and continued for giving OBCs in the 1990s, as well as continued to say that in the manifesto the Congress has not been found wanting, has initiated a dialogue, has tried to push for caste-based reservation in Parliament, including constitutional amendments, but because of the lack of consensus, unable to do so, and has made those points quite clear. And of course, Mr. Janardhan Dwivedi, who has of late been quite sidelined within the party, not getting that space, trying to make a mark by trying to see that Rahul Gandhi and his new team hear his new point of view, making that statement. But Mrs. Gandhi quite categorical because of all parties condemning what he has said, and in particular the Congress party, no less than the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe communities, in particular the cells, the MPs, all quite upset with the way Mr. Janardhan Dwivedi has allowed Mrs. Gandhi's name to be misused and to be seen as being part of this entire controversy. And that is the reason why Mrs. Gandhi wants to set the record straight and make it clear that the Congress party will never be found wanting in its effort for helping reservations for not only the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe.
It's clearly a politically explosive thing to say in an election year, and it's clear that there is politically across the board going to be a lot of difficulties for parties to admit that this should be done and that there should be reservations based on another criteria like economic backwardness instead. But Sunil, thanks a lot for that update. And one of the reasons why, as we said right at the beginning, that Mr. Dwivedi's comments did surprise everyone is because he has been one of Mrs. Gandhi's closest advisors. He's been writing her speeches. Through the day today, as Sunil mentioned, there were political parties from the BSP, the SP and others who completely condemned what Mr. Dwivedi said, and until a few hours ago, he was completely standing by his comments and defending them.
ये समाप्त हो जाना चाहिए था. पहले 10 साल के लिए था, फिर दूसरे उसके लिए था, लेकिन क्यों नहीं हो पाया? इसमें निहित स्वार्थ घुस गए. सामाजिक न्याय और जातिवादी में अंतर होता है. उनसे ये अनुरोध करता हूं कि वे अब एक हिम्मत करके बड़ा और कड़ा फैसला करें.
He represents the old guard in the Congress party, and his advice to Rahul Gandhi cannot be dismissed lightly, even though it contradicts the party's official line on reservation. Not surprisingly, there were many who were shocked by his stand.
Whether he's a millionaire, if he belongs to the scheduled caste, he cannot get that respect in the society.
उनका वो व्यक्तिगत व्यू नहीं हो सकता है. ये कांग्रेस पार्टी का स्टैंड है.
But despite the criticism, Dwivedi stuck to his guns.
गरीब गरीब होता है, उसकी कोई जात नहीं होती है. मायावती जी इस देश की बहुत बड़ी नेता है, महत्वपूर्ण नेता है, लेकिन अगर आप गौर से देखें तो बहुजन से लेकर सर्वजन तक की जो उनकी यात्रा है वो आखिर क्या है?
Janardhan Dwivedi's idea of economic reservations has really created a major controversy, and even those who seem to support the principle of it are now questioning the timing. Why is it that this is being talked about and proposed just before
the elections.
Congress is indulging into a double speak.
It may have got everyone agitated, but the party refused to be drawn in. Sonia Gandhi even released a statement reiterating the party's commitment to caste-based quotas.
सरकार के पास ऐसा कोई प्रस्ताव विचाराधीन नहीं, सरकार ऐसे किसी प्रस्ताव पे विचार नहीं कर रही है कि आरक्षण का क्राइटेरिया कोई बदला जाए। जो संविधान में प्रावधान है उसी आधार पर हम अपना सरकार आरक्षण जारी रखेंगे।
So was it just musings of an elderly statesman or a clever electoral ploy? Janardhan Dwivedi simply says he stands by it all. In New Delhi, Sunitra Chaudhary for NDTV.
So is there a lack of political will to end caste-based reservations in this country? Is it even possible? Is it something that's even possible in a system that is so deeply entrenched in caste even today? Joining us tonight, Sanjay Jha from the Congress Party, Sambit Patra, national spokesperson of the BJP. We have Professor Kancha Alaya, Dalit writer and activist, joining us tonight from Hyderabad. Manoj Jha, the spokesperson of Lalu Prasad Yadav's RJD, and Dr. Surjit Bhalla and Sohail Seth also here on the program with us tonight. Surjit Bhalla, to you first. You've just heard what Sonia Gandhi has said, completely distancing herself from Janardhan Dwivedi's comments. I'm sure that didn't come as a surprise to you.
Well, it came a little bit of a surprise because there goes the Muslim vote for the Congress. I mean, already they've lost practically every socio-economic caste group who's voting for them. And if you will, if you removed caste-based reservations, the one very important segment of the population that comes into the picture are poor Muslims. So therefore, I don't know what they're trying to do by this measure. But mind you, I think I support Dwivedi's comments to a limited degree. It's time for a change. The first thing you've got to do is to move to an economic basis. And the second thing you've got to do is to get away completely from reservations and go full headlong into affirmative action, where you will have schools, you have hospitals, you have scholarships, you aid the bottom half of the population as much as you can. But reservations, really, there's practically no place on earth, just like everything else the Congress comes up with, which has this kind of a basis for helping the poor.
Sanjay Jha, so what happened here exactly? Mr. Janardhan Dwivedi is a very senior leader, has been very close to 10 Janpaths, and he makes a radical statement like this, and the Congress goes back to playing its old politics. It actually seemed like somebody had thought of a refreshing idea within the Congress party, which has quickly got junked in 24 hours.
No, I'll leave you to speculate on whatever you believe is the politics behind it, but the truth of the matter is very straightforward, Nidhi. In India, the equality of opportunity is a fundamental point of debate. When we look at the scheduled caste, the scheduled tribe, the OBCs, etc., where reservations have been there now for over 6 decades. And the reason behind that is that, if you don't provide access of an equal opportunity to people who have been historically disadvantaged, I think the right term that we need to really factor in is that there has been a backwardness which has been perpetuated over a considerable period. It's not just since independence. It's actually been part of our social structure for centuries even before. And end of day, as a government, and since we have been in government for a considerable period, it's your responsibility to try and minimize the social and economic imbalance that exists in society. I mean, this is the larger macro issue that we need to first factor in. And the second point is, end of day, we are going through this process where people are talking about affirmative action. In fact, I will tell you that, in fact, the private sector, this is something that Mr. Gandhi has in fact encouraged the private sector to look at. But I'm part of the private sector as well, Nidhi. And every time we talk of diversity, and diversity is about including more women, including the LGBT community, the physically challenged, and also members of the SC, ST, and the other backward communities who can be included. So it's a very positive sign. And the reason why the government jobs and educational institutions...
It actually seems to take India back 60 years. You're not encouraging meritocracy. And politically, it's not just the Congress, it's other parties as well that are, this is the old argument that reservations have further divided this country. They haven't united us. They haven't, done any good, many would say.
Yeah, but Nidhi, I'll just make one point. If you look at the history of India, our economic history, you'll find that the private sector really has come into play post-1990s when liberalization began. And for a long time, I mean, the only access that people had the ordinary person had, who had access to basic level of education, was either in government jobs or in the public sector jobs. And hence reservation was a very, very sensitive subject. I think it has delivered to a significant extent. Now, going forward, I mean, it can always be debated as to, how to include other sections. I think that point is extremely valid, that the economically weaker sections, irrespective of what caste and what religion, need to be looked at. There's no denying that. And that's something that as a party and as a government, we are completely
Suhail is dying to
debating on
jump
that
into
issue
this
as well.
one. Suhail, come on. You know that no political party in this country will have the guts to say end caste-based reservations, which is why Mr. Dwivedi's comments were a surprise to many.
Because I agree with Surjit. I don't think the politics of India has anything to do with India and its development. It has to do with short-term electoral gains, which, by the way, is a fair thing. I mean, let these guys do whatever the hell they're doing. I have three things to mention here. Number one, there are three pillars that we have to discuss this evening: merit, opportunity, and reservation. You can't build a just society where merit has no place, where 80% of people get the benefits they do because of the way they were born or into where they were born. Having said that, I completely agree that the backward castes and the tribes have been disrespected by a society that we are all part of. That will not change. This kind of economic segregation, or this kind of segregation which is social in nature, will further create derision in the minds of those who don't belong to the backward caste. And we've seen that happen in our country. You can't go to a doctor because he's the best doctor. You don't go to a doctor because he's a doctor who's gotten there because of admissions thanks to a quota system which respected reservation. I'm all for equality of opportunity, but here's my question. What have the people who've run our governments from 1947 till this day done? Have they been able to create respect? No. Have they been able to create equal opportunities? No. You are continuously pushing down a nation which should be built on merit, on capability, and you are giving them sops. No matter what you do, you are creating an unequal, imbalanced society, even with reservation. There has to be a third way. I don't know what that third way is, but this is not clearly the way, because what you're doing is you are creating sectionalism within a society which by our constitution was meant to be equal in every which way.
And therefore, the point I made is that you're further dividing this country. Sambit Patra, does the BJP have the guts to say today that it would support the end of caste-based reservations?
Nidhi, I'll buy a line from Suhail's statement that there has to be a third way. First, as far as the BJP take is concerned, the constitutionality of the idea is very important. I mean, you cannot do away with anything that is constitutionally viable. That has to be debated, discussed. And as far as this whole gimmick is concerned of the Congress, 2 quick points.
Why do you call it a gimmick?
No, I call it a gimmick because anything that goes against the 10 Janpad dictum cannot stay afloat for such a long time of period without a rebuttal. If the rebuttal comes after 4 days or 5 days, it means there was an experimentation that was done. That's why I call it a gimmick. Secondly, no one in the Congress can go against the 10 Janpad dictum. No one, absolutely no one, at least a person of the stature of Janardhan Dwivedi. Thirdly, and most importantly, what I meant to drive in home, at least to my friend Sanjay, was this kind of gimmickry that you showed today only exposes 2 quick points about Congress, that your Dalit empowerment policy, I use the word empowerment with emphasis because we know the obvious reason as to who wants to empower the whole nation. The Dalit empowerment policy of Congress has failed somewhere, and the Congress has accepted that today. Secondly, the economic empowerment also has failed somewhere. The economic empowerment also has failed somewhere. That's the reason as to why the suddenly talk of, at the fag end of the sinking ship's life, the talk of economic empowerment.
My question is very simple, to borrow a phrase from another anchor, a straight question, which is that why isn't it possible for us to have a debate in this country?
Yes.
A debate on what are the steps we can take to end,
because that will require solutions.
A second.
Yeah,
that will require
solutions.
And it would shake the entire system.
Give me a
second. Grandstanding
I would like to answer this question. As I told in the beginning, I wanted to borrow this line from Suhail that there can be a third option. But the third option needs debating, serious discussion. It needs coming together.
Nobody wants to do that.
Everybody in this country wants to debate, discuss on all the issues of importance. But the problem is, suddenly the Congress crops up the issue at the fag end, standing on the exit door. You cannot have discussions.
I won't blame the Congress. With due respect,
Suhail,
I don't blame the Congress or the BSP or the BJP to use my own phrase, is hammam mein sab nange hain.
No.
It is political grandstanding and political expediency.
It's not
Let's be honest.
hammam.
When the BJP was in power, they didn't do very much with this area as well.
Let me come out with the facts. The fact is, yes, if you wanted to debate, then this whole thing should have cropped up 2 years, 3 years before this. Why suddenly 3 months before the Lok Sabha election? Is it not that you are trying to buy something by this statement, or is it that you have a good intention? It is
What
only
is the
the first
possible
one.
benefit though then? Sanjay, quick response and then I'll come to the rest of the panel. Yes.
Yeah, no, I'll keep it very short. You know, Nidhi, the truth is that any government, and I'm not trying to make any political rhetoric statement, it has to create a level playing field. Now, all of us sitting on this panel are probably, you know, more elite than the normal people we are talking about today. And the truth of life is that those who are disadvantaged, who have seen, and we know stories, we read even stories today of people from the Dalit community who are not allowed to enter a certain part of a rural household which belongs to a certain upper caste people. So there have been serious prejudices in the past which have perpetuated over a considerable period. Now, to give them an opportunity is, I don't think it's wrong. You can always debate, and I think that's something that everybody is open to, so are we, about whether at which point should we review them, whether it's a percentage, etc. These things can be debated. But in principle, we got to accept the fact. And this is something that the Congress brought in the 1950s. Even today, we have introduced bills to make sure there's a proper legal framework. We have talked about giving them even an opportunity in promotions.
To be very proud of.
And you know, the argument,
we're still talking about.
No, Nidhi,
the point is that
Nidhi,
I think the point that, like, for instance,
Suhail raised a valid
make
point.
is that change the
No, just
criteria.
one point. Suhail raised the point about efficiency versus equity.
Change the criteria.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying Suhail raised a valid point about this, you know, debate which happens in all societies having similar issues of efficiency versus equity. You know, when you provide reservations, do you have a qualitative compromise? I think these are factors that need to be addressed by institutions and by employers who hire people from the disadvantaged community. Give them extra skill, give them more training. But the principle behind it, I don't think we should ignore that. It's a sensitive issue. It's a human issue. And I think that's the only way as a society we can feel proud of our democracy. So I think we need to look at it in a larger context.
Mr. Jha, is it politically incorrect to start talking about even having a debate on ending caste-based reservations in this country? Or, you know, is it that it suits political parties in this country to perpetuate caste politics? Because at the end of the day, electorally, there has been data that proves that you know, certain castes do vote in a certain way, which is why parties, you know, follow that kind of politics. Mr. Jha.
Let me bring in the fact that it's good to have the debate, but the debate should draw in a diversity of opinion. I was listening to Suhail, who was overemphasizing in fact on merit, and I tell you, in our university system, we actually have evidences to show that merit is a myth which has been perpetuated in the name of preservation of privilege of certain communities or certain caste. That's number one. Because that should also be part of the debate.
Can you explain that, Mr. Jha?
No, merit is a myth.
Why?
Because merit depends on n number of factors,
if you look at your leadership,
like resources. Can I respond, because I did not disturb anyone? It's a healthy debate. I presume it's a healthy debate.
Very.
Yeah.
Now, what I meant, that merit traditionally, and there have been, I can refer to you n number of books, that merit is what kind of resources you have, where you were born, what kind of schooling you had, what kind of advantages you have. Now, when we compare the merit which emanates out of one section compared to the so-called merit from the other section, which did not have any of these resources at command, and disadvantages were lots, you cannot have a very principled position on merit, number one. Number two, none of us have been looking at this reservation policy from the Constituent Assembly debate. Article 15, Article 16 and the subclauses, they emerge out of the Constituent Assembly debate. The idea behind reservation was that somewhere monopoly of capital or monopoly of privilege is antithetical to democracy. We wanted to build a vibrant democracy. And I tell you today that it is good to debate, but please, if you have a rainbow democracy today, it is on account of the fact that we have reached out to those who never dreamt of the fact that they would be represented.
Mr. Jha, is it possible to change the criteria now, more than 60 years after independence?
let me say this very with affirmation that reservation policy is not employment generation policy. It is not poverty eradication program. Reservation policy is basically to look at the unequal social structure, reach out to those whose hands are smaller compared to the others.
No.
You need to debate, I don't dispute that, but the fact is the journey is still, I mean that we need to travel a lot. We have not even achieved 30% of what we set for ourselves as our goal.